Okay, good. It's on video. I thought it was on picture.
Okay, well, I am presenting about legal interpreting. Sorry, I forgot I had to do this. The settings, there are so many different settings. Usually people just think legal interpreting is in a courtroom, but it also, of course, it has courtroom proceedings, which include family, civil, and criminal, as well as attorney and client conferences, depositions, witness interviews, interrogation rooms, jail or prison, real estate settlements, court-ordered treatment, such as rehab, and also educational programs, investigations by law enforcement, which includes Department of Children and Families, which means DCF, as well as traffic stops and crime scenes. The consumers make up a wide variety and include, but are not limited to, the plaintiff, defendant, the victim, witness, member of the jury, or also the family member of any of the above. And also a judge or attorneys. And as I was reading, So You Want to Be an Interpreter, I came upon a passage about consumers and read that several deaf attorneys are in general practice in both Canada and in the United States, and only one deaf judge that the authors knew about. And they generally have a full-time personal interpreter, and so, or they use real-time captioning, and therefore it is very unlikely that you will walk in and and they will be your consumer or your client. Placement. For legal interpreting, I read very many different things about placement. It all just depends on the situation, and it can also be very tricky. And instead of listing all the different placements, because it really just depends on your deaf client or the room you're in, I do just have things to be aware of, which includes rapid turn taking among many individuals, because when you're in a courtroom, you will have several different lawyers standing up, or witnesses coming onto the stand, or questions being asked, and it's chaos in a courtroom. So it is very important to make sure your deaf consumer knows who is speaking and make it very clear of who is speaking and when they are speaking, and so you have to go into a lot of detail when describing them. Another thing to be aware of is uncomfortable situations. If you, for instance, you have to go into a jail and interpret for a prisoner who is deaf, then you want to make sure that you stay safe yourself and always make sure that you do not put yourself in harm's way. Prohibited areas are another thing to be aware of. For example, the well, which in a courtroom, it is the place in front of the judge's bench, which is strictly prohibited for anyone to walk in front of. And that is because they want to, again, make sure everyone's safe. The judge is safe, and the bailiff and everyone in the room, that you always have a place. Prepping and teaming. I'm sorry, I just fixed up my video. Sorry, I have to start it again. Okay. Prepping and teaming. When prepping, it is very extensive and very detailed, and you have to analyze everything. So it includes contacting the counsel or the hiring party to request documents, which could be a lawyer or anything, and you want documents from the previous cases or anything that would help you interpret for the person. And I read on RID's SPP that according to the SPP, because interpreters are necessary for communication, sharing preparatory materials such as documents does not breach the attorney-client confidentiality privileges.
That's true.
Legal interpreters are held on a stricter confidentiality laws, and therefore information is forbidden to be shared by any interpreter to any third party. That is a huge, I was reading articles on that specific case that many people were suing different interpreters because they felt that their private information was being shared to people that are not even involved in the case. And a few deaf people have won their cases because of that, and now those interpreters are forbidden to practice in legal interpreting. As well as preparation also includes familiarizing yourself with jargon, which includes laws, rights of all involved, whether that be the plaintiff or the
Defendant?
Yes, everyone involved, the lawyers and the deaf person themselves, and everyone's rights the interpreter needs to be aware of. Also, consulting with a CDI. It is very important to work with a CDI for this because legal is so intense that you could have so many things wronged, and therefore working with a CDI can assure that the message is not just clear but also correct. And as far as teaming, I read that there is a minimum of 2 interpreters are typically used, and the languages used varies depending on the deaf consumer's needs. You could have a consumer who uses ASL, SEE, tactile if they are deafblind, and also for MLS and MLC consumers, always bring in a CDI. As far as being qualified, legal interpreters are bound by the ADA and the NAD RID Code of Professional Conduct, and the ADA requires the use of qualified interpreters, meaning that the interpreter is able to interpret effectively, accurately, and impartially, both receptively and expressively, using any necessary specialized vocabulary. As well as the Code of Professional Conduct requires that interpreters possess the professional skills and knowledge required for specific interpreting situation. This is just the qualifications and special, credentials continued. For the special credentials, RID awards the Specialist Certificate, which is legal for SCL, to interpreters who meet specific requirements, specific criteria regarding prior certification, education, and experience. And for CDIs, if you have to call in a CDI, they will be awarded by RID, and it's called conditional permit. And that is for all legal settings if you have to call in a CDI. And as far as training, interpreters should have additional training in the legal system, legal terminology, skills and development specific to legal language, and also interactions prior to interpreting. Training. Interpreters should have additional training for the legal system, which include terminology and skills development specific to legal language, and as well as interactions, legal interactions before they have to interpret. Also, I was reading on the SPP, that according to RID, while the number of interpreters holding the SCL has increased, not enough interpreters hold the credential to fully satisfy the demand for legal interpreters. And therefore, as a result, much legal interpreting is done by individuals generally certified who do not have a specialist degree but have gone through the necessary training to understand and use special vocabulary associated with legal settings. And those are my resources. And that is done. Does anyone have any questions? And again, like there's so much stuff that I could have talked about. A lot of it talked about ethical and like conflict of interest.
Yeah.
And that was a huge piece just by itself. But it was basically saying the person who interprets in the interrogation room cannot interpret anything else from there on out. Because if you interpret in one situation, in one setting, you could become biased, or anything could happen.
Yeah.
You could have your own opinion, or you could hear of something that might not be
I think it
brought
might be
up.
linked as a jury member, and you're not supposed to have prior knowledge or be affected by the media or that kind of stuff. The same idea. They're looking for the same thing. So if you're interpreting in a classroom where the teacher, where you're interpreting an IEP meeting,